the obsidian orchid. The cold click of the handcuffs echoed with an unnerving finality on the deserted rural road. Officer Jake Thorne smirked, convinced he had her cornered. A lone woman, seemingly defiant, with an ID that screamed fake to his seasoned eyes. He was about to learn that some people aren't so easily apprehended. The last vestiges of twilight bled from the sky as Thorne's patrol cruiser settled behind the sleek, midnight blue electric sedan. He clocked it near the intersection of Whisperwind Lane and Oak Haven Boulevard in the quiet, affluent community of Blackwood, Connecticut. A flickering tail light, an easy stop, a routine assertion of his authority that he often thought was the best part of the job. Wiping a hand over his tired face, he sauntered to the driver's side. The tinted window descended just enough to be irritating. Behind it, a woman in her late 30s, her dark hair woven into an intricate series of braids, met his gaze with an unervingly steady calm from behind the frame of a tailored charcoal blazer. No music, no excuses, just a silence that grated on his nerves. License and registration, he clipped out, foregoing any pretense of courtesy. She produced a slim, black leather wallet without a word. Her movements were fluid, economical. He snatched it from her hand. "Name?" he demanded, not bothering to look at the ID yet. "Celeste Vance," he grunted, finally flipping open the wallet. He saw her face, a complex holographic seal, and a series of acronyms that meant absolutely nothing to him. Sure, he thought, probably cooked this up online for $100. A familiar surge of irritation coursed through him. He hated it when they acted clever. "This some kind of joke?" he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. "It is a legitimate government credential, officer." Her voice was unervingly level. "What agency?" "OSS? ESA." He scoffed. "People with real badges aren't afraid to say who they are." "I am not at liberty to disclose that information," she stated, her tone flat. "So it's a fake." Thorne pressed, leaning in closer, savoring the moment. "You know, presenting a fraudulent ID to a police officer is a felony, a serious one." "It is not fraudulent." The sheer calm in her voice was like a pebble in his boot. It was pure defiance. He walked back to his cruiser, a plan solidifying in his mind. He'd teach her some respect. "Dispatch, I need a secondary unit," he said into his radio. "Got a female here in a blue sedan, non-compliant, presenting a bogus federal ID. Need backup." Less than 5 minutes later, a second patrol car arrived, carrying 2 rookies who looked barely old enough to shave. They hung back as Thorne approached the sedan again, his confidence swelling. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step out of the car." Agent Vance exhaled softly. Then the car door opened. No argument, no resistance. As she stood, one of the rookies moved in, his voice cracking slightly. "For my safety, I'm going to have to place you in restraints until we can verify your identity." "Officer," she said, her voice dropping a notch, "I strongly advise you to reconsider. You can explain all that down at the station." That's when the phones came out. People on the sidewalk, sensing a spectacle, began to film. Thorne didn't care. Let them watch. Celeste Vance simply turned, presenting her wrists. Her blazer shifted, revealing a tiny, flesh-colored earpiece. Thorne saw it, but dismissed it as another part of her act. She was calm, too calm. That bothered him more than screaming ever could. He failed to notice the subtle tilt of her smartwatch, or the single whispered word she spoke into it just before the cuffs were locked into place. The metal bit into her skin. The 3 officers formed a loose triangle around her. The rookies were jumpy, but Thorne stood motionless, watching her like a hawk. "Where you headed?" he asked, his tone accusatory. "Home." "And where's home?" She met his gaze. "I think you already know I can't answer that." He stepped closer, invading her space. "Listen, lady, this mysterious act isn't helping you. What I see is a woman with no valid ID, refusing to cooperate. It's not a good look." "You have everything you need," she replied. "You just refuse to recognize it." That did it. The condescension in her voice, the way she stood there as if he were the one being tested, it infuriated him. A bystander shouted, "Hey, you're really cuffing her over a tail light?" Thorne ignored them. He tapped his radio. Dispatch. What's the word on that ID? Static hiss back. Still searching, Jake. Nothing in the system. He turned to the rookie. Pat her down. As the young cop stepped forward, Celeste spoke again, her voice cutting through the tension. I wouldn't do that if I were you. The rookie froze. Are you threatening me? No, she said. It's a professional courtesy. And that's when they heard it. The shriek of tires on asphalt. 2 obsidian black SUVs, appearing from nowhere, without lights or sirens, screeched to a halt a half-block away. Doors flew open, and 4 men in dark suits emerged. They moved with the chilling efficiency of a well-oiled machine. The tallest one strode directly toward Thorne, flashing a badge. Federal Protection Directorate. The man announced, his voice like cold steel. That woman is an asset under our protection. Release her now. Thorne felt a flash of rage. I don't know who you people are, but she is detained until I confirm her identity. The agent got nose-to-nose with him. Officer, you are seconds away from interfering in a matter of national security. Let her go before you make a career-ending mistake. Another agent moved past them and whispered something in the ear of the rookie, who held the cuffs. The kid's face went white, his shoulders slumped as if the words themselves had a physical weight. He looked at Thorne, his eyes wide with a terror Thorne didn't yet understand. It wasn't a prank. This was real. The lead agent turned to Celeste. Agent Vance, are you secure? She gave a single sharp nod. The agent pulled a thick, rugged device from his coat, held it to the ID Thorne was still clutching, and a sharp green light flashed across the screen. A sharp beep cut the air. Credentials confirmed, the lead agent stated. Thorne's mind went blank. What agency are you? He stammered. The agent gave him a look of pure dismissal. She works for people who don't have business cards. Officer, stand down. Agent Vance's wrists were still cuffed, but her expression was unchanged, the calm of a professional who had drilled for this exact disaster. At a quiet nod from the lead agent, the rookie fumbled with the key and unlocked the restraints, his hands trembling. Celeste Vance simply flexed her fingers, rolling her wrists. Thorne staggered back. You can't just override my stop, he blurted, the words sounding weak. Officer Thorne, the lead agent's voice dropped, low and menacing. Your stop nearly compromised a year-long deep-cover operation. You put a national security asset at risk over a broken taillight. At that moment, Thorne's radio crackled. Jake, wait. Getting a priority ping from a secure channel. Stand by. Too late. The world had moved on. Agent Vance walked past the local cops as if they were statues and began a low, clipped debrief with her team leader. She was already back at work. Anyone touch the vehicle? The agent asked. Just me, Thorne mumbled. Don't go near it again. Another agent pulled a hardened case from a hidden compartment in the trunk. Its contents, a complex array of sealed electronics. What is that? Thorne demanded. Classified, Vance replied, not even gracing him with a look. Everything's classified with you people, he snapped. She finally paused and turned to face him. Yes, because sometimes the people you're supposed to trust are the ones setting you up. Before he could respond, her entire demeanor shifted. Her eyes swept the crowd and locked onto a man in the back wearing a faded baseball cap. He wasn't filming. He was waiting. Target spotted, she whispered into her watch. The agent spun. The man bolted, diving into a dark alley. An agent gave chase. Who the hell was that? Thorne yelled. The reason I was on the street tonight, Vance replied. A muffled pop echoed from the alley. Seconds later, the agent returned with the man in cuffs. It's a tracker, not a mic, he confirmed. Celeste Vance exhaled sharply. The stop was random. Her gaze drifted to the stunned rookie, then down to the police radio on his belt. The implication was clear and poisonous. The precinct had a traitor. An hour later, Agent Vance walked into Blackwood Precinct on Meridian Street. She moved with an authority that made the building feel like her territory. Thorne found her in the main hallway. She had just exited the server room, having used her own key card to gain access. You can't just walk in here and take over, he said, his voice tight with humiliation. I don't have time for a lesson in jurisdiction, officer. I deserve to know what's happening. Agent Vance stopped and looked at him, her gaze like a physical blow. You deserve nothing. You nearly destroyed a federal operation tonight for one reason. She took a step closer. When I handed you my credentials, you didn't see a federal officer. You saw a black woman you thought you could bully. Your bias almost got people killed. I'm not here to educate you. I'm here to find the leak you enabled. Before Agent Vance could move, another officer entered the hallway. It was Sergeant Ray Kincaid, stocky with a perfectly shaved head and a uniform far too crisp for a graveyard shift. His eyes locked on Vance and went ice cold. Well, Kincaid sneered. The ghost of Ravenwood decides to walk among us. Thorne looked between them, confused. You two know each other? He was attached to my unit overseas, Vance said, her voice flat, right before he vanished mid-operation, along with Securicom's device full of encrypted contacts. Is that your story? Kincaid stepped closer, radiating menace. My version has you leaving 3 bodies in a safe house. So, you're going to play hero in my precinct now. I'm not here to play, Vance said. She pulled a small digital recorder from her pocket and pressed play. Kincaid's own voice filled the hallway, clipped and distorted. Asterisk, she'll pass the Whisperwind Lane checkpoint by 2100. It's her standard route. You'll have a clean shot. Asterisk. Thorne's face went slack with shock. I intercepted your signal this morning, Ray, Vance said, her voice like steel. You've been leaking intel for months. You fed them my location tonight, hoping they'd finish the job you failed to do in Kabul. Kincaid didn't waste time with denials. He lunged, but Thorne, finally seeing the truth, moved faster. He tackled Kincaid, and the 2 men crashed against the wall as other officers swarmed in. Through the chaos, Agent Vance calmly walked up to the struggling traitor. Sergeant Ray Kincaid, she announced, her voice cutting through the noise. You're under arrest for treason. As they dragged him away, screaming threats, she turned to the stunned and silent Thorne. He was just a leak, not the source. Let's go. She led him not to an interrogation room, but back to the main bullpen. On a large monitor, she pulled up a city schematic centered on the federal courthouse. Your partner Kincaid was a pawn used by a city councilman named Victor Sterling, she stated, not as a theory, but as a fact. Sterling has been using a compromised contractor, Apex Solutions, to create security holes across the city. The traffic stop tonight. It was bait, a distraction designed by Sterling to have me detained by a local cop he knew was prone to overreacting. She paused, letting the insult land, all to cover the real event. The transfer of a case full of CIA personnel names to a courier codenamed Shadow. Thorne was speechless. How? How do you know all this? Agent Vance glanced at her watch. Because the transfer is happening right now in a maintenance tunnel under Millstone Creek, and you're coming with me. You started this. You're going to witness how it ends. The air in the tunnel was thick with the smell of rust and damp concrete. They found them at a junction. The courier, Shadow, a slim man with dead eyes, held a silver case, and beside him, holding a pistol, was the city councilman, Victor Sterling. You're early, Agent, Shadow said with a thin smile. And you're sloppy, Vance shot back. Give me the case. You've already lost, Vance, Sterling declared, his voice echoing off the curved walls. You're protecting a system that's already dead. You're leaking the identities of active field agents to foreign powers, Vance said, ignoring him and speaking directly to the courier. He didn't tell you that, did he? That case isn't full of data. It's full of names. You think they'll let the man who carried their death warrants just walk away? She saw the flicker of doubt in Shadow's eyes. I want the case, she repeated, her voice dropping. Or the unedited video of you meeting your contact in the alley tonight goes public. Your face, your car, everything. Sterling tensed. She's bluffing. No, Shadow said quietly. She's not. In one explosive movement, Shadow turned and slammed the heavy case into Sterling's chest. Sterling crumpled, the gun clattering on the concrete. Agent Vance lunged, securing the case and kicking the weapon away as a stunned Thorne covered the courier. It was over. 2 hours later, back in the Blackwood precinct, the air was thick with a different kind of tension. The bullpen was silent. At the center stood a stone-faced deputy director from a national intelligence agency, flanked by 2 Federal Protection Directorate agents. Agent Celeste Vance stood calmly to the side, an observer. Officer Jake Thorne stood before them, stripped of his jacket, his face pale and sweaty. "Officer Thorne," the deputy director began, his voice dangerously quiet. "Your actions tonight, motivated by what can only be described as gross incompetence and prejudice, directly endangered a critical national security operation and the lives of 6 active officers. You are a disgrace to your badge." He nodded to one of the FPD agents. The agent stepped forward. "Your weapon, officer." Thorne numbly unbuckled his holster and handed over his sidearm. "Your badge." His hands trembled as he unclipped the badge from his belt and handed it over. He was no longer a cop. He was just a man who had let his hate ruin him. The deputy director pushed a single piece of paper across the desk, a resignation form. "Sign it," he commanded, "or we will prosecute you as a co-conspirator to treason. Your choice." With a shaking hand, Jake Thorne picked up the pen. He didn't look at Agent Vance, but he could feel her eyes on him. He could feel the weight of his failure, the finality of his ruin. He signed his name. The scratching of the pen, the only sound in the room. Justice, he now understood, didn't always come from the barrel of a gun. Sometimes it came from a quiet, unshakable woman in a business suit who simply let you drown in the consequences of your own poison.